Happy 2025. My name is John Andrew Williams. This is the Coaching to Flourish podcast. We are live. Super excited for today, what we have queued up. We are getting ready for a brand new year, and I have an exercise for us. This is the time of the year, when the New Year's resolutions are becoming really real. You're about a week into it, so hopefully those are going well. And I have an exercise that I think will help in something that I've been doing myself. I'm excited to do it with you. It's an exercise on perspectives as well as goals and things like that will happen in 2025. So here we go. First thing you're going to need is get something to write with, and maybe paper, pencil, iPad, computer, whatever you got, something you need to put words on a page, and this is that. So the first thing I want to talk about is perspectives. And perspectives from a coaching standpoint is something that is pretty standard. We in coach training, we do it around session, I think it's around session 10 or 11 in our 1.0 training. In the 2.0 training, we take a little bit of deeper dive with it. But basically, a perspective is the lens through which you see something. It's the thing that gives meaning. And so the idea is that when you're working with perspective with the client, you want to separate out the phenomenon, the experience, from the perspective with which you're looking at it. And when you make that distinction, when you make that separation, you're able to design the perspective that you want to be in consciously, and then reapply it to the original situation and any other situation. So to begin with, I would invite you to look at, ask yourself the question, what is a goal that you have for 2025? What's the big thing that you're after? I'll give you a second to write that down. I'll write it down myself. There we go. And then once you have that big goal, the next question is to ask yourself, how are you relating to it? Like, what are some of the things that you find yourself saying to yourself? Like, what are some of the things you say to yourself when you think about this goal? How easy, how hard it is, how challenging, chances of making it happen, what needs to happen with it. And then the next step on this is to take a step back and ask yourself, how would you describe your perspective, your default perspective on this goal, on this topic? If you had to create a metaphor for the perspective, for instance, does it feel like a grind? Does it feel exciting? Does it feel like to what degree are you filled with hope? To what degree are you filled with disappointment? What's the flavor of that default perspective that you're playing with? And then the next step on this is to take another step back and look at, what would it look like to craft a perspective completely separate from this topic around a knowingness? Like, tap into that aspect of yourself where you know something is going to happen. That quiet self, that self that is quietly determined. And when you sink into that quiet, determined perspective, the perspective where the past nor the future has a lot of influence on the present, but the present moment can expand, and you allow it to sink into a knowingness, almost a gratitude for all the past mistakes, a gratitude for the future challenges, but really sinking into that, we'll call it present, quiet knowingness. And as you sink into this perspective, notice how your energy is shifting. Notice what's changing, what's happening internally, what you're having to let go of to get into this perspective. And from here, there's another step to take, which is now for the rest of January, from this perspective, what do you know? Like, know in your heart, know in your bones, know what is going to happen. What is that quiet knowing telling you this is what January brings? This is that goal that you're after. This is the knowingness through which you're putting forth what you're trying to accomplish. As you're writing it down, go ahead and stretch just a little bit more into that space. What's that stretch goal? What's on that edge of knowing what's going to happen? Now, if we're looking at perspectives like it's like a dish, like an ingredient list, something that you're trying to put together, let's add a little bit of hope. Let's add a little bit of excitement to this, just like a drop or two. And then go to February. Knowing that you have taken this step in January, what's that next step in February going to look like? What's that space where you know that you need to step into this perspective, that you need to stretch yourself? Who are you in February? Let's go to March. What happens in March? And now let's look at that next quarter. It's March. You're taking the action steps, doing the things. Let's look at that next quarter from April, May, and June. What do you know is going to happen Q2 in 2025? What does Q2 2025 look like? It's exciting, isn't it? These quiet perspectives. This perspective work, what it does is it helps shake up the usual mental emotional patterns with which we look at our lives by default. And what it does, it helps use joy, happiness, this knowing, these different perspectives. It uses them as strategic tools. And it's not to say that this is a toxic positivity or an idea where we avoid or think about, avoid negative things or only think about positive things, but it's really using your focus as a strategic tool. Over the winter break, I took my boys to the mountain and teaching them how to snowboard. And one of the instructors was talking about this difference between, like where you want to go, you point. You point your hand where you want to go. You point your eyes where you want to go. Most new beginners, when they're starting to snowboard, they look down at their feet, they look at the mountain, they look at their snowboard, and that's where they tend to go because that's where their focus is. Us in a year is very much like that. It's where do you put your focus? What are you looking at? To what degree are you complaining? To what degree are you expressing gratitude? To what degree are you holding in your mind where you most want to go? And how often in a day do you tap into that? So for Q2 of 2025, where from a quiet knowingness perspective, what do you know is going to happen Q2 2025? And then let's amp it. Q3. Q3 is coming, summertime. Here it is. What's that knowingness in summer? At some point, it starts to feel exciting. At some point, you start to really sink into, all right, like, what if this really happens? And then you change that what if to, okay, like I know this is going to happen. I think, this is a possibility. This is not even just a possibility, but it becomes a probability. And then when it starts to shift into probability mode, then it's all right. So what are the habits? What's the process that's going to make? What are the day-to-day action steps that I most need to take? So then, as you shift to Q4, the question here is, what are the daily actions that you have brought into your schedule that have helped you sustain Q1, Q2, Q3? What are those daily processes that you've added to your life? Now, as you're sinking into this, go ahead and sink a little more to that quiet knowing space, that aspect of self where you know that you know. And ask your 2025 end of year self, what has been the biggest thing that you've learned? What's been the biggest learning of 2025? And what's the experiment that you can run in this next week that would be the first step in testing that? And then from this, the last step in this process is to boil it down to a word. What's the What's the intention? What's the word? What's the name that you want to give this, even this whole exercise that you've crafted for yourself? What's the name of this project? The intention for 2025. Now, this perspective work, this knowingness work, this is some of the deepest work that we can do as humans, because it makes us look at the narratives that we have for ourselves, the stories that we tell ourselves, or that give meaning, and then feed back into that initial perspective. And I'd invite you to play with perspectives, go deeper into them, look at how they interact, and how you can add to it like an ingredient list, and step into this perspective as a strategic tool. And this tool is working when you feel gratitude, both for the challenges and the mistakes, the things that have not gone well, as well as the things that have gone really well. And when you can step into gratitude for both of those things and accept, all right, this is where we're at, this is where this is going, this is the excitement of what's possible. When that becomes real and that becomes something attainable, that's when I see clients, I see myself, I see a lot of the people in my life. That's when it feels like there's traction and it feels like things are moving, and 2025 will be the best year yet. Thank you for joining me on this Tuesday, first week in January. We're going to continue to do the Coaching to Flourish podcast, continue to move this forward. We'll be here next week with Raj, and move forward with some more content on perspective work, on this kind of work. And in the meantime, enjoy your quiet knowingness of 2025. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you soon.